In West Africa, a region where politics often tiptoes on a razor's edge, the fall of a seemingly unshakable regime sent shockwaves around the globe. At precisely 3:12 a.m., armored columns rumbled through the silent streets of Abidjan. Within an hour, the presidential guard had been subdued. By sunrise, a different flag fluttered over the palace. Just like that, another chapter closed in Africa's protracted confrontation with autocracy. But this wasn't just another coup. This was Ivory Coast, the jewel of post-independence West Africa, long paraded as a model of stability while its democratic facade slowly eroded. For over 10 years, President Alassane Ouattara governed with an iron will masked in democratic rhetoric. The elite grew wealthier. The populace grew weary, fearful, voiceless. But that silence had morphed into the stomp of boots. The fatigue had mutated into defiance. The strongman had fallen. "Military coup in Ivory Coast," the headlines declared. "Another despot dethroned." But this uprising wasn't solely about one ruler. It was about the machinery that kept him there, the forces that enabled him, and the reasons the military finally decided to break ranks. Power corrupts, they say, but in Ivory Coast it also clung. In 2010, Ouattara rose to power under international applause. An economist with elite credentials, he stepped out of global finance into the presidency. Yet beneath the gloss lay entitlement, an unshakable belief that power was his by right. As his second term ended, the constitution demanded change. Ouattara had other plans. In 2020, claiming the 2016 charter had reset his term limits, he pursued a third mandate. A cunning ploy, a dangerous precedent. Protests surged, demonstrators were beaten, dissenters were jailed or exiled, dozens died. Still, the vote proceeded, and Ouattara emerged victorious once more. Western leaders, as always, prioritized stability. Peace must be preserved, they said, but peace for whom? While the economy grew on paper, the majority were left behind, jobless, disillusioned, and unheard. Democracy had become a gilded cage, and the jailer wouldn't relinquish the keys, but cracks were appearing, in barracks, in villages, in exiled communities. Enough was enough. Whispers became a movement, and the movement was headed straight for Ouattara. In Ivory Coast, the military has always walked a fine line between protector and enforcer. Following the 2010-2011 post-election conflict, Ouattara had restructured the armed forces, rewarding loyalty, sidelining dissent, merging elite units under his direct command. But control founded on fear is fragile. Younger officers, witnesses to the degradation of their communities and families, began questioning their allegiance. Why protect a regime that offered so little in return? Why serve foreign interests over national dignity? Senior generals dismissed their doubts. The younger ranks didn't forget. They waited, they watched. Then came the coups in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. With each toppling, the message grew louder. Power can be reclaimed, even from suits and speeches. In 2022, a classified document warned of ideological infection from Burkina Faso's revolutionary fervor. It was meant to suppress rebellion. Instead, it lit a fuse. Quiet meetings began, in outposts, along borders, over encrypted apps. This wouldn't be for glory or greed. It would be for redemption. The idea had matured, and it was no longer just a whisper, it was a plan. Coups don't erupt with gunfire, they begin with stillness. By early 2023, the air in Ivory Coast had changed. The pageantry continued, ribbon cuttings, public addresses, visits from dignitaries, but beneath it all was mounting disquiet. Opposition parties were crippled. Free press had faded. Civil society was drained. Then Ouattara vanished from the public eye. For over a month he made no statement. Rumors flew. Illness, exile, hiding. His office downplayed it. But for the army, the silence confirmed the rot. No one was steering the ship. That vacuum was what the dissident officers had been waiting for. The most effective coups don't burst, they unfold. As the world looked elsewhere, precise blueprints were drawn. In barracks, in dormitories, in rural command posts. Communications hubs were mapped, power grids studied, escape routes tracked, foreign movement monitored. Lessons from Guinea, Sudan, and Niger were studied. This coup would be sharp, swift, strategic. It would strike before foreign powers could react. Its codename, Operation Renaissance, the spark. A message from within the palace, just 2 words. It's time. At 3:12 a.m., it began. Abidjan slumbered. Convoys advanced. Lights dimmed. Engines low. No sirens, no bravado. First stop RTI, State Media Headquarters. The soldiers moved in silence. No resistance. Guards didn't defend the regime. They upheld the republic. A 28-year-old officer stepped to the mic. "This is not a coup against the people," he declared. "It is their restoration." The broadcast went live. Next, the Presidential Guard. Brief resistance, a few shots, but most had already defected. By 4:30 a.m., the palace was encircled. Its gates stood open. Ouattara was gone, evacuated 2 days earlier under French protection. His final escape from a nation he once claimed to uplift. But there was no uplift now, only judgment. By dawn, the Ivorian tricolour stood unguarded, not by elites or foreign handlers, but by soldiers bearing patches that read, "For the people," and thus ended a regime. No parades, no tanks, just an eerie calm and the slow dawning that something had truly shifted. At noon, a statement echoed nationwide. The age of imposed democracy is over. Ivory Coast is home again. The world blinked. The people exhaled. In villages, radios buzzed. In cities, traffic halted. In the diaspora, phones lit up. For the first time in years, emotion flowed unfiltered. This wasn't chaos. It was clarity. When puppets fall, puppeteers scramble, and across Western capitals, confusion reigned. France, caught off guard, issued a cautious statement. "We are monitoring developments and encourage a return to constitutional order." But order for whom? For France, Ivory Coast was a dependable outpost. French troops, firms, and financial institutions were deeply entrenched. In hours, that grip began to loosen. Washington echoed similar platitudes. "We urge calm and democratic restoration." But Africa was asking a different question. Whose democracy? From Bamako to Ouagadougou to Conakry, support poured in. Burkina Faso called it a march toward dignity. Mali called it overdue. Guinea offered logistical aid. Other nations, Senegal, Ghana, remained notably silent, their own populations watching closely. The African Union suspended Ivory Coast, but the gesture rang hollow. The same had been done to Mali and Burkina Faso, and yet those nations endured. Perhaps, analysts speculated, this wasn't disorder, but rebirth. In Abidjan, soldiers didn't loot, they didn't parade, they organized. The regime had crumbled, but something new had emerged. A possibility, not of military dominance, but of reimagining. In days, schools reopened, markets resumed. The internet, usually cut in such times, remained live. A rare feat. The military council addressed the nation, calm, composed, almost civilian. No revenge, no witch hunts, no foreign trials, only renewal. They formed a civic transition body made up of clergy, economists, judges, activists, and yes, soldiers. It wasn't utopia, but it was a beginning. Then came the announcements that stunned observers. All mining contracts were to be reviewed. A commission would trace who had profited from state wealth, and France's military presence under reassessment. No accusations, just a clear declaration. We are not against the West, but we are not for sale. That sentence echoed beyond borders. In Bamako, in Niamey, crowds danced, not for a coup, but for what it signified. A continent wasn't collapsing, it was standing up. In Abidjan, murals blossomed, one of a soldier handing a book to a child, another of a ballot box crushing a golden throne. One simply read, "No more pretend democracy." It wasn't yet a revolution, but it was a breath of truth. The dictator had fled, but his network lingered. Judges, tycoons, media heads, his allies remained. Within days, former ministers disappeared, some fled, others caught with cash and passports in hand. The council tread carefully. We dismantle. Systems, not men, but they weren't naive. Power morphs. It strikes when vigilance fades. An inquiry began into elections, contracts, media control. One revelation rocked the country. Over $1.2 billion siphoned through shell firms in Paris, Dubai, Mauritius. The West denied wrongdoing, but the people didn't need evidence. They had lived the consequences. When clinics lack medicine but politicians charter jets, no audit is needed, only justice. Still, no military men would run for office. The council promised a new charter in 6 months, public forums in 9, elections in 12, with observers from Africa and the diaspora. A radical vow, no military candidacies. The aim wasn't to trade uniforms for suits, but to rebuild the base. And across Ivory Coast, one question emerged. If not dictatorship and not imported democracy, then what? The nation stood at a fork between memory and vision. This time it would chart its own course. Across Africa, sparks flew. Students in Senegal launched forums. Police in Gabon joined youth protests. In Nigeria, a new hashtag trended. Our turn next. Ivory Coast had done more than unseat a leader. It had ignited imagination. Analysts asked, was this a coup or a course correction, a rebellion or a reset? Could this be a model? Clean, deliberate, rooted in people's will. One journal wrote, "The West fears coups, Africa fears silence." A truth long ignored. For decades, stability meant preserving access to Africa's riches. But for Africans, it meant functioning schools, clinics, and elections. This is the story.